This is Taking Stock for Monday, January the 10th, 2011. I'm Pimm Fox. Now, Julie Hyman is following some breaking news on AMD, the chip maker, coming to us from our markets desk. Julie, what's up? Executive leaving the company. He's out.
Right. The top executive, in fact, Dirk Meyer, the chief executive officer of Advanced Micro Devices, is indeed leaving the company. And it looks like that the president and CFO, Thomas Seifert, will be taking over as interim CEO. Now, why is all of this happening? Well, our Ian King at Bloomberg News wrote a story back in November saying that Meyer was struggling to really improve his credibility. AMD has lagged its peers considerably. It's little changed over the past year. Semiconductors as a group have risen by 17-18%. And of course, AMD has lagged Intel and then some. It has about 20% of the chip market. Intel still controls about 80% when you look at the areas where they compete directly. And so obviously this has been an ongoing issue for AMD. Now, in the statement, the chairman of the board does say that Meyer stabilized Advanced Micro Devices. At the same time, he says that the company can really accelerate its strategy better under different leadership. So saying there pretty plainly that AMD thinks that it can perhaps do better under different leadership. So the shares have been falling in the after-hour session as a result of this. Again, it wasn't clearly expected that something like this was going to happen. The shares, as you can see, down about 4% here, and we'll continue to track it to figure out what's going on. Just one other quick note, Pimm. The company at the same time came out with a fourth quarter sales forecast that's a little better than analysts anticipated at $1.65 billion. So while announcing some news that seems to be affecting the stock negatively, at the same time came out with this more positive sales forecast.
All right, well, let's bring in someone who knows a lot about AMD, Julie. I want to bring in Daniel Berenbaum, a semiconductors analyst at Auriga USA. Daniel Berenbaum has a sell rating on the shares of AMD. And Daniel, can you explain why do you think that the executive, Dirk Meyer, why would he have left? I mean, this is part of, AMD's strategy, right, was to become a fabless operator. They spun off the factories. They've expanded into the graphics chip market. What's going on with the company?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, clearly this was a surprise. The language in the press release leads you to believe that this wasn't entirely Dirk's choice to leave. But as you mentioned before, AMD has been lagging Intel. There have been some delays to the product roadmap, some very public delays to the product roadmap, and AMD really has struggled to regain market share. I do think a lot of folks viewed Dirk as the person that was going to lead the next charge on the product roadmap. And really, it feels like he hasn't been in charge long enough to affect changes. But one of the reasons we've had the sell on the stock is because our checks continue to suggest product delays, manufacturing execution struggles. So I guess at a certain point, the board just decides, well, that's enough.
Julie, come in on this topic, because if you take a look at what's going on with AMD's stock and you counterpoint that to what they released in terms of sales, it seems as though Dirk Meyer was someone that the company was counting on, at least as far as investors are concerned.
It does seem that way. Maybe it's just sort of the unexpected nature of this change in management happening. Daniel, if I can ask you, I mean, do you think that this is a positive move, that perhaps that AMD can do better in terms of leadership?
It's always difficult to say, and it's, it takes a long time to change a culture of a company, and it takes a long time to alter product roadmaps. I mean, when you think about products that are hitting the shelves today for AMD, these were on the drawing board 5 years ago. So, the long-term plans have already been laid. It will be interesting to see who they bring in on a permanent basis that they think can really change the path of the company.
Daniel, was AMD's strategy to really compete on price as opposed to performance?
Well, it depends where you look in the market. I think that AMD, to some extent, nobody wants to compete on price, but if you don't have the performance, then you're somewhat forced to compete on price. And I think, particularly in the server market, where Intel has a very strong product cycle right now, AMD's been forced to compete on the lower end, been forced to compete on price, because they just didn't have that higher-end performance.
So is this good for Intel? I mean, I know you like the shares of Intel. Does this mean that you should go out and buy more?
Well, I'm not sure that this is a positive for Intel so much as it is a negative for AMD. I think you could say it's a mild positive for Intel. Any kind of transition, any kind of change of course at a competitor is going to be positive for Intel.
Hey, Dan, I have another question about Intel while we're talking about it. Also, we got the news today that Intel and NVIDIA have settled their disagreement that they had over patents and licensing. Intel's going to pay NVIDIA $1.5 billion. And, you know, as AMD has sort of struggled, NVIDIA, forget about Intel for a minute, NVIDIA has been on an upswing. What's your view of that agreement?
So what's interesting is it's a different form of a cross-licensing agreement that has been in place before, and we're still getting details on this. The conference call is actually just starting there, but it seems like what had been just a simple cross-license agreement previously between the companies where Intel got some NVIDIA technology, NVIDIA got some Intel technology. Now NVIDIA is actually getting less of the technology from Intel, and specifically that there's been a dispute around licensing for chipsets for the communications protocol that allowed NVIDIA to build chipsets for Intel. It seems like NVIDIA is now sort of formally not getting that technology from Intel, and so this is why Intel is now paying the fee to NVIDIA, but we're still getting details on that.
All right, I want to thank you very much, Daniel Berenbaum. He's joining us from Auriga, USA. Also, Julie Hyman from our markets desk, all talking about the resignation of Meyer as the chief executive of AMD, Tom Seifert taking over.